Thank you for joining us this evening. You are now attending the webinar entitled Bob Dylan Center Living Artists and Legacy Archives. Our leader for the session is Steven Jenkins, Director of the Bob Dylan Center. Steven Jenkins serves as Director of the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a position he has filled since prior to the center's public opening in May 2022. As director, Jenkins oversees daily operations, sets long-term goals for mission-driven programming, and collaborates with the executive team on exhibitions, events, educational initiatives, fundraising, audience expansion, and local, national, and international outreach and impact. Jenkins is a 30-year veteran of the nonprofit sector, having held leadership positions at San Francisco Bay Area organizations, including University of California Press, Glide Foundation, San Francisco Film Society, San Francisco International Film Festival, Frameline, San Francisco International LGBT Film Festival, San Francisco Cinematique, Film Arts Foundation, and the Ansel Adams Center for Photography. Jenkins served as editor-in-chief of Art Week in Bay Area City Search, senior editor of See, a Journal of Visual Culture, and has contributed hundreds of articles on visual arts, music, film, literature, and culture to national publications including New York Out, California Detour, SF Camera Work, and Publishers Weekly. His books as a writer and editor include City Slivers, City Slivers and Fresh Kills, the films of Gordon Mataclock, and Model Culture, James Casabia, Photographs. As a curatorial and development consultant, he has guided programming and fundraising efforts for a wide variety of nonprofits and independent artists. In addition to Dylan, his lifelong favorite music artists include Elvis Costello, Nick Cave, and Bruce Springsteen. To our audience of teachers, both nationally and internationally, I present to you our speaker for the evening, Steve Jenkins, Director of the Bob Dylan Center. Steve, we look forward to your talk. Thank you for joining us.
Michael, thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
To you and the work of all your colleagues at the National Humanities Center. It was a pleasure to get to know some of you and help host your group in Tulsa last year. I just want to say I think the work that the NHC is doing, as well as the incredible day-to-day work that I know so many of today's registrants are doing in schools, really is just more crucial than ever before. Not to get into a bum note here, but we're seeing the attempted gutting of the Department of Education, and we all need to band together and do everything we can to uphold public education in the humanities. And I really applaud the efforts of the NHC, and again of every teacher and educator who's able to join us for this discussion today. So thank you. And Michael, you'll let me know if you can hear me loud and clear, or I suppose if you can't, and I'll adjust accordingly.
All right, good deal. You sound great. Thanks.
Okay, good to know. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. Just a quick repeat. Yes, my name is Steve Jenkins, and I'm honored to serve as director of the Bob Dylan Center, which opened in Tulsa, Oklahoma in May of 2022 as the permanent home of the Bob Dylan Archive. And I thought I'd start by giving you all the quick backstory on how this came to be, because you might not automatically associate Dylan with Tulsa or even know that such a thing as the Bob Dylan Archive exists. So to begin with, I'll give you the origin story. In 2016, so almost 10 years ago already, Dylan, this is famously Private Dylan, made it known through a few folks in his camp, some very trusted colleagues, people who have worked with and for him for decades, including his manager, a wonderful guy named Jeff Rosen. Through Jeff, Dylan let it be known that he had a collection, that he had been keeping things. And again, for all he gives us through his recordings, through his performances, he had never once spoken in public or in a magazine article or interview or anything about the fact that he had been conscientiously holding on to all of his creative materials really since the mid 1960s. The first few years of the 60s, when he was getting started, when he first arrived in New York, he was less careful about holding on to things. But really, starting in around 1964, he would hold on to handwritten lyrics. Name your favorite Dylan masterpiece or song, and Dylan was holding on to the writings. This might be on a notepad, a pocketbook, uh, increasingly as he started to tour and travel on hotel stationery, but in whatever form, he was just putting away these writings that he was making that would turn into these extraordinary songs. And these were being put in his desk drawers at home, in cardboard boxes, just casually tossed into boxes, to sort of deal with later. He was filling up closet shelves with this material. And in addition to the handwritten lyrics, which form a good part of the collection, there are journals, notebooks, uh, thousands of photographs in Dylan's own, personal collection, home movies. Uh, to name one enticing bit of footage, Dylan on the set of an Otto Preminger film, the director Otto Preminger, in the mid 60s, speaking to John Wayne, who was on the cast of the film. Just one of so many curios that, again, nobody ever knew had existed because Dylan was just privately tucking these things away. Uh, so much material had built up by 2016 that, again, Mr. Rosen and some other trusted folks in Dylan's camp suggested to him, look, we should really find a permanent home for this material. We want to preserve it. Things are going to start deteriorating. There's a risk of things getting lost or damaged. So why don't we find a home for the material that fans and listeners can come and view, that scholars and academics and educators and teachers can access, and we'll just take the load off of ourselves of having to preserve all this, and we'll find some trusted professionals who know how to do this work. So Dylan was convinced, and he thought, okay, this is a good idea. The question then became, where should this collection find its home? Now, this is Bob Dylan we're talking about. He's a man of the world. He's revered and respected worldwide. So he really had options. He could basically decide, where does he want to put things? And he heard about Tulsa, where he had played in the past, but he's played everywhere. He's always on tour, actually starting again in a couple of weeks in Tulsa, as a matter of fact. We'll get to more of that. But rather than say, let's just say he knew about Tulsa, its rich musical history, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Tulsa's, social history and development. But more than anything, he was intrigued that our organization already had opened the Woody Guthrie Center, which is the home of the Woody Guthrie Archive. Now, if you're Dylan fans, or if you've seen the recent biopic, A Complete Unknown, starring Timothy Chalamet as Dylan in his younger years, you know how important Woody Guthrie was to Bob Dylan. Some friends in Denver played a 19-year-old Dylan the music of Woody Guthrie when he was traveling in Denver and went to visit some folks. And this is what just blew his mind. He has later said, I'd never heard music like that before. Um, I I realized this is a voice, this is a vision, this is a whole approach to making art that, as Dylan said, he could really relate to. And he was so enamored of the Guthrie music that he was hearing that he wanted to track down Woody himself. Now, by this point, Guthrie unfortunately was in the throes of Huntington's disease, which is a really rough condition that takes away one's motor skills and ultimately cognitive skills. And this was not a well understood condition at the time. Guthrie had essentially been institutionalized because medical doctors didn't quite know how to treat Huntington's disease. So he was there on his own in Greystone Hospital in New Jersey. Dylan went out to New York, made his way out there as so many artists and writers and budding artists had before, and of course still, and with the intent of finding Woody, just feeling like he needed to let Guthrie know how powerful his music was for young Dylan, who still, by the way, who wasn't even Dylan quite yet. He was still Robert Zimmerman from Hibbing, Minnesota. He had not quite taken on the Dylan name and let's say persona, one of the first of many persona Dylan's taken on. So Dylan goes out, he finds where Guthrie's living, again in this hospital, and goes to him. And though the Complete Unknown film takes some artistic license with that pivotal moment, for example, Pete Seeger, the neo-folky godfather, wasn't visiting Guthrie at the same time when Dylan shows up, but Dylan did indeed, in truth, come to Woody, guitar in hand, and I think they recognized in one another pretty early on that they were kindred spirits. Bob has said, I was a Woody Guthrie jukebox back then. I mean, essentially, he could play any and all Woody Guthrie songs, and he did indeed bring out his guitar. And Guthrie, who could no longer sing or really even speak, listened as young Bob Dylan played Woody's songs to him. And there was, I think I can imagine just some magic in the air there between them, with Guthrie recognizing, boy, this young guy seems to know what he's doing. He's got a voice and a vision of his own that's starting to develop. So Guthrie remained a pivotal figure for Dylan all throughout his life. And when Dylan learned that the Guthrie Archive and the Guthrie Center were in Tulsa, he said, let's go to Tulsa and find out how all this came to be. We benefit immensely in Tulsa from having a number of very supportive philanthropists, one in particular who runs something called the George Kaiser Family Foundation. And they had gotten the Guthrie Center started. And Dylan and his camp met Mr. Kaiser. They had a long look and visit at the Woody Guthrie Center. This predates my arrival on the scene. I was still doing my thing in San Francisco and didn't know that I would ultimately be offered my dream job as director of what became the Dylan Center. But from everything I've heard, Dylan himself was very impressed with the Guthrie Center. He really responded positively to Tulsa. The city has let's call it a checkered past. The Tulsa race massacre, the hideousness of that incident, a tragedy on a grand scale, was approaching its 100th anniversary and still wasn't really being talked about in 2016 when Dylan visited. Nonetheless, he was well aware of it. In a song that he released a few years later called Murder Most Foul, he has a line, "Take me back to Tulsa, the scene of the crime." By that point, I think everyone knew what he was referencing. Nonetheless, Dylan, savvy about American history, knew all this about Tulsa, and on the brighter side, knows of Tulsa's really impressive music history. Back 100 years to Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, who pioneered what's known as Western swing music. And we have a wonderful 100-year-old honky tonk in Tulsa called Kane's Ballroom, where concerts are still presented to this day. That was Bob Wills' headquarters, a real sawdust on the floor sort of dance hall. Dylan knows and loves that music. All of the amazing American jazz musicians who came through Tulsa and played in the very hip and happening clubs of the Greenwood neighborhood. Greenwood, also known as Black Wall Street, where, again, prior to the Tulsa Race Massacre, there was a thriving African-American community, hugely successful, building a very, very vibrant neighborhood filled with successful business people of all stripes, and really a neighborhood that valued music. And I mean, all the jazz greats played there, and Dylan, again, knows this. Then moving up, say, to the 1970s, you have the Tulsa Sound, which is the name given to that period and that genre that really was popularized with musicians like J.J. Cale and particularly the great Leon Russell, who passed away some years ago, but still remains the patron saint of Tulsa in many ways. And so, Dylan knew these guys. He played with them. He asked Leon Russell to produce a session that resulted in some wonderful songs in the early 70s. Dylan also aware of other cultural institutions in Tulsa, the very fine art and history museums that we have, again, the musical lineage. And he talked about in one of the very few public announcements that he made about his ultimate decision to locate his archive in Tulsa, he said he's tuned in almost as if it's a radio frequency to what he called the casual hum of the heartland. I really like that phrase because I think it neither condescends to Tulsa nor overly romanticizes the region, but it does, I think, manage to set apart Oklahoma from the coasts, where maybe one might expect a cultural institution with a strong musical tie, to Dylan, to be. But sure enough, Dylan said, no, things are going to get lost in the shuffle if we do this on the coast. Tulsa it is. So, to our great good fortune, he said, look no further. I want the archive to live in Tulsa. This, again, was in 2016, and an arrangement was made to build the Bob Dylan Center. Let me click on an exterior shot. Hopefully you can all see this as I'll start going through some slides. And this is our building, actually somewhat before we opened. So we have a teaser there on the front doors. Now, of course, those are glass doors that you can see through, and they're much more inviting. But quoting Dylan's "A Ballad of the Thin Man," a song from 1965, we have the phrase "There's something is happening here" on the front door. And that served as a teaser for a couple of years as the construction was going on. This is a 100-year-old paper factory in Tulsa's Arts District. So wonderful old brick warehouse buildings. It just feels right to house the Dylan collection. And very fortunately, it's on the very same block as our already existing Woody Guthrie Center. So we have an umbrella organization called American Song Archives that operates and oversees both the Woody Guthrie Center, the Bob Dylan Center, and we have other collections and archives as well. For example, the 1960s protest singer Phil Oakes. We have his collection. And Tom Paxton, another folk singer from the early 60s, to name but a few. So that's the umbrella organization. The work took quite a good amount of time. Boxes started arriving by the dozens of all the material that we had learned existed, and it wasn't really cataloged. Again, things were just in boxes, and so it fell to my now colleagues who had started this work again prior to my arrival to go through all the boxes and really it took 2 solid years to carefully go through each and every item, to catalog it, to have a thorough inventory, and most importantly, to really make sure that archivally everything was up to standard. So there are, I don't know if we have any licensed archivists on the call today, but this is something that people earn their PhDs in, and we have extraordinarily talented and conscientious folks on staff who have been well trained in going through documents and papers, making sure that things aren't deteriorating. That film footage, which we have a lot of, that folks had never seen, of Dylan on stage and in the studio, that all of that material is being preserved correctly. So it was a good 2 years of a couple of staff members going through all the material. Simultaneously, the project started of outfitting the center itself, which essentially is a museum, although we like the word center for various reasons. And so that was the process of working with architects and exhibition display experts and sound engineers and all the rest who could outfit, pardon me, this 30,000 square foot building so that it could properly house and showcase the materials. Dylan, while he was very happy to find Tulsa and to feel comfortable about making it the home of the archive, said, "But don't call me. I'm not going to come to the opening. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to shake anyone's hand," which is characteristic, I would say, of Dylan, who is notoriously private and very protective of his personal life. And so we understood that. What he did do, though, as a very nice gesture, and I'll switch to a new slide here, is he said, "Give me some dimensions and I'll make you a metalwork." Now, this is a lesser known aspect of Dylan's artistry, but one that he's very serious about. You see, hopefully it comes across well in these couple of photos, that he is a metalworker of some considerable skill. And this is a 16-foot tall structure. He refers to these structures that he makes as gates, as entryways, as portals. He said, "I will make you a gate for the center." So we are thrilled that when you first walk into the Dylan Center, this is right in our entryway behind those doors that I showed you previously, and you see both this towering photo of young Bob towering over the rooftops of New York when he first arrived there, and quickly made his mark as an extraordinarily gifted new face in the crowd of neo-folky singer-songwriters. And then we've got his metalwork right there near this towering, much larger than life photo. And on one hand, I'll say I find these structures to be whimsical, to be abstract. Dylan has a very good eye for composition. And so you can take it on that level, but also to me, it kind of ties back to this love of Guthrie. Guthrie, who stood up for workers, who stood up for the formation and sustenance of unions. Because I see in here a reference to industry. These are pieces of scrap metal that Dylan has foraged from factory floors. Perhaps a place like Youngstown. I happen to be in Ohio tonight, and I passed by Youngstown, and I'm in Cleveland. Still is an industrial city, and I think that the structure really pays homage to everyone who works with their hands. People who built America. So I like to consider the gate from that perspective as well. However you choose to interpret it, it was a very nice gesture on Dylan's part, who otherwise said, "Listen, these materials are now yours. Do what you want with them." It's interesting to me because Dylan has always espoused a "don't look back" philosophy. "Don't Look Back" being the title of a documentary made by a Cinema Verte documentarian, D.A. Pennebaker, about Dylan in the mid 60s. And it really captured Dylan's refusal to trade in nostalgia. He is always looking forward. He's more concerned with the next song, tomorrow night's concert, the next painting, the next metalwork, than he is the past. Paradoxically, though, and fortunately, he did hold on to everything. So it's a guy who this is an artist who doesn't look back, yet he amassed tens of thousands of items over the course of some 60 years. It's an intriguing paradox to me. But again, I'm just glad that he held on to it all, because now we can make it available to as wide an audience as possible. So that's a bit of how this came to be. The pandemic slowed things down a little bit, of course, but finally the center was ready to open in May of 2022. So we're coming up on our third year. I want to show you some more of the interior. This is just off of our reception area. It's our gift shop, and you'll see again, larger than life images of Dylan at various points throughout his career, from young, baby-faced 20-year-old to, worldly, seen it all, done it all, older, wiser, sometimes scowling Dylan. And you get to see there some of what we do. We have merchandise tied in with the center. Actually, it's been quite popular. Visitors like to get souvenirs. We also, of course, have a very nice selection of books by and about Dylan and also other artists. And this is important to note that while the center in Tulsa, obviously named the Bob Dylan Center, really is all Bob all the time, if you'll allow me first name basis with him, what we see in Dylan is an exemplar of fearless creativity. And this really gets to the mission of the center, which is to explore creativity writ large. So again, it's Dylan as this, truly one of a kind, absolutely brilliant, groundbreaking, trailblazing artist, unlike I would argue any other within American popular music of the 20th and now 21st centuries. But I want us to be accessible and of interest to any and all folks who, maybe Dylan isn't their favorite, or maybe this isn't someone they know a whole lot about. I think by the time they visit the center, they gain a new appreciation for him. But the way we keep things as lively as possible is look at the work of other creative artists too. And we'll see some examples of that, and I'll mention some later. But really, the mission is to celebrate the creative process by looking at Dylan and his long and unique career. It's important, though, that it's not just a few of us on staff who are interpreting the Dylan archive material. You see here, it's not the best photo, sorry, it's a little dark, but Voices of the Bob Dylan Center. These are some of the extraordinary artists and writers and musicians who we've called upon to lend their own perspective to the Dylan story. So we have, first and foremost, Joy Harjo. You might know Joy as the former U.S. Poet Laureate, 3 terms running, which is extraordinary. She's just a absolutely magically incisive and empathetic writer of poetry and prose. She's written memoirs. I highly encourage you to delve into Joy's work if you don't know it. And Joy is our very first artist in residence. She is a Tulsa native. She still lives in town. She's a very proud member of the Muskogee Nation with very strong ties to her native ancestry and culture. And it's really an honor to work closely with Joy on a number of projects at the center. Joy is an amazing musician. As she would be happy to tell you, she picked up the saxophone at age 40. She had always been very intrigued by that instrument, and she taught herself sax. She writes songs. She's a beautiful performer. She's also a huge Dylan fan. And so she was just a natural for us to invite to be our first artist in residence. We have other amazing artists on this wall, right? The writer Tom Piazza, based in New Orleans, the actress Kimber Elaine Sprawl, who appeared on Broadway in the musical Girl from the North Country, based on a suite of Dylan songs. You've got Sean Wilentz, Lewis Hyde, these very gifted writers, Jennifer LeBeau, a filmmaker, and Elvis Costello, who I'm always happy to mention because, on a personal note, along with Dylan, he's in many ways been the artist of my lifetime who has had the biggest impact on me. And Elvis has worked closely with us on a number of occasions at the center. So again, that idea of a plurality of voices where we want to, Dylan quotes Walt Whitman in a song from 2020. The song is called "I Contain Multitudes." And he took that line from a Walt Whitman poem. And he sure does. This is Dylan entering his 84th year in a couple months, he seems to embody, I suppose as we all do, many different individuals within one. And we really try to get to the heart of that plurality of personalities, of modes of expression. And so in honoring that idea of containing multitudes, we really want all of these other people and all of you as visitors, as educators, to bring your own sense of who this Dylan figure is to bear on the experience of going through the center. I now want to scroll through a few more images. Visitors typically, once they get through the entryway, they start in this gallery. We have a multimedia presentation called Multitudes, made by a very gifted filmmaker, Jen LeBeau. And what we have here, again, idea of the multiplicity of Dylan. So rather than do a straightforward documentary that goes through in linear fashion Dylan's life, work, and career, we wanted this sort of kaleidoscopic approach. And so you enter this room in which imagery and sound are surrounding you from all sides. What you're seeing with those documents is facsimiles of sheet music coming out of a piano, and then that sheet music panel, those panels end up being incorporated into the film projection. Again, the idea of the flowering of creativity, the sheet music not content to rest on the piano, but literally taking flight as Dylan is again and again reinventing the very notion of what a pop song can be. Further view of that gallery. This is a film that runs on a loop throughout the day, so wherever you walk in, it's a good starting place, and then the film, catches up and goes back to the start. So that's where a lot of visitors start. You move into gallery space, where you have Dylan's life and work segmented into 9 eras along the perimeter walls of this very large gallery. Again, you'll get some different views of it. That's a longer shot. And in the center of the gallery here, we've taken the opportunity to go deep into a half dozen songs. You're seeing there on the right, like a Rolling Stone, which we heard as part of the intro music that Michael put together for us. Certainly one of Dylan's best known songs. And in looking at these 6 songs in great detail, we delve into the writing, the recording, the production, the performance, the arrangement of these songs. And in all cases, we're trying to place these songs and really all the Dylan work within a socio-political context, within a cultural and artistic context, because Dylan, of course, is responding to the world around him. Like a Rolling Stone, a song like that, while on one hand, Dylan says it was this almost stream of consciousness expression that he was pouring out in words on paper. But like everything, it's informed by what's surrounding him. This is the mid 60s, a very tumultuous time. He's moving away from some of the purely protest oriented music of the earlier 60s, where he was still very much in thrall to the Woody Guthrie mode of, the battered acoustic guitar and the wheezing harmonica, the sort of 3 chords and the truth approach to music making. And he was getting into something that would really set the model for the golden age of rock and roll music. Again, I'll reference the Timothy Chalamet biopic. Whether you've seen that or if you know a bit about this period of Dylan's work, the mid 60s were so tumultuous. And here he is at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, which historically had been a very acoustic based event, again, for the sort of folky purists. And that's a wonderful, absolutely extraordinary tradition of American music. But Dylan, always 1 or 10 or 100 steps ahead of everyone else, knew that it was time to make some noise. And this is the famous going electric moment, where at the Newport Folk Festival, Dylan, against everyone's best wishes and advice, insisted on plugging in and playing with a combo led by Mike Bloomfield, an extraordinary blues guitar player, really making a glorious noise, playing songs like a Rolling Stone and Maggie's Farm. And so we get to tell that whole story of Newport 65 in our deep dive into that one song. Going further here, I want to point out, in a way, this is part of the holy grail for hardcore Dylanologists. This is one of what's known, there are 3, what's known as the Blood Notebooks. They have that odd name because Dylan was carrying around and writing in that tiny script the songs that would appear on his 1975 record, 10 years after the Going Electric moment, the record called Blood on the Tracks, which is a classic of classics. that just hit its 50th anniversary. And here you see Dylan figuring out the songs. You might know, for example, Tangled Up in Blue or Simple Twist of Fate or You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go. These timeless songs. And finally we get to see again Dylan holding on to all this material privately for all these decades until now we have them on display. So those are of great interest to Dylanologists. We have the other modes of storytelling because really we are all about storytelling and visualization and music. This is the jukebox that we have in the gallery. I mentioned Elvis Costello previously. He programmed this jukebox with 160 of his favorite songs. Elvis has a really encyclopedic knowledge of popular music, going all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century. So it's a wonderfully eclectic assortment of songs, many of his Dylan favorites, but also covers of Dylan songs by Roseanne Cash, Ema Sumac, Adele, and on and on and on. And then songs that that inspired Dylan himself by Guthrie, of course, but also the blues greats, Muddy Waters, Lead Belly, people who Dylan just revered. Little Richard, who also blew his mind, as he did, I think, everyone in the 1950s. No one had ever seen anybody look or sound like Little Richard. So it's important for us to tell those backstories that Dylan, as unique and idiosyncratic and absolutely singular as he is, again, is in a lineage of music history. And so we do a lot. There are listening booths where you can go deep into, the country greats, the blues greats, who were a big influence on Dylan. This happens to be a photographer named Lisa Law. Our stairway to our second floor is flanked by blown up images that Lisa took of Dylan in that classic mid 60s tousle haired, polka dot shirted, epitome of cool. So that's a shot there. You get up to the second floor again of our 30,000 square foot facility, and you have on the left what we call the archive wall. I have another shot of that here, where we have many of the three-dimensional items from the archive, some of our favorite pieces, where you can see, if you can make it out, toward the lower right, that's a tambourine. That is the tambourine that inspired Dylan to write the song Mr. Tambourine Man. There was a Mr. Tambourine Man, a wonderful musician named Bruce Langhorne, who played it, and we have that whole backstory. So you can go deep into, and we have on a video screen here, there's a lot of interactive elements in the center, and you can scroll through and find the accompanying material that goes along with the items in each of the 100-some boxes. Fan mail. This is interesting and I think reveals a lot about the kind of artist and person that Dylan is. This is the tip of the iceberg of what arrived when the archival materials were sent. Bags and bags of mail. Now, Dylan saved all of this, but every single one was unopened. So from the 60s on, people pouring their hearts out to Dylan, just feeling the need to express to him what his music meant, telling him where they were in the world, and they're hearing his music on the radio. But we didn't know that until these letters came our way and now are part of our collection. And our archivists carefully opened these letters and read one moving story after another. Dylan, in that way did hold on to them. So certainly on some level, it must mean something to him that fans all over the world are writing to him. But also, starting in the mid-60s, he became very wary of internalizing everything that listeners and critics were projecting onto him. It was very common in 64, 65 that Dylan was called and labeled the voice of a generation. And, in this sort of prophet way. Now, this was thrust upon Dylan. Dylan, as he's done from day one, sidestepped that labeling of himself. He's never comfortable with what any of us or how any of us might want to define him. He will always say, in a contrarian fashion, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not the voice of anyone but myself. The generation, I don't know what the generation's all about. All I can do is speak about the way the world looks and sounds to me. And I do that through songwriting. And if it connects with people, great. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. But I am in no way uh, taking upon myself the task of being the voice of a generation. And I think we see it again with the letters. It's lovely that someone wants to write to him, but it could be dangerous, seductive certainly, but dangerous to start believing perhaps all that one is saying about you, or all that thousands or millions of people are saying about you. And so he has steered clear of internalizing too much of that. This goes to all aspects of his personal life, and we honor that at the center by not delving into the personal life at all. There are the major biographical details: born when, born where, moved to New York, but there's no mention deliberately of marriages or children, because of all. Think about it. Anyone in the public eye, anyone who we consider part of our you know crazy celebrity culture, particularly in America, you do not read about Bob Dylan in People magazine. He's not spilled all over the tabloids. I think he's unique in that he has steered clear of it all, and so we don't really want to do that at the center. Again, it's about the creative process. It's about what makes this guy tick, and by extension, what do creators have in common? What's different among creators that makes each favorite musician, visual artist, writer, poet, choreographer, dancer so fascinating to us? Is how they do what they do, where they draw from, inspirations. But it's less about uh, who a song might have been written about in Dylan's case. There's a lot of speculation among fans of that sort of thing. There are hundreds of books that have been written on that sort of thing. But again, for us, it's the materials. Here's my colleague Mark Davidson talking some visitors through a visit to the archive itself. Now, like all centers and museums, we have a collection that's much, much larger than what we can showcase in the public galleries at any one time. So we swap materials in and out. It's also important for preservation of materials, that we don't leave things out for years on end. So we bring things back to rest, as it's called in the archive world, back in the archive. And this is Mark showing some lucky visitors during our opening weekend, the behind the scenes. Here's a close up of some of the handwritten manuscripts. Again, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of pages that, once again, we're just so happy Dylan had the wherewithal to hold on to, because we can really study the marginalia, the crossouts, the additions, the change of literary reference or biblical allusion, as Dylan's working through getting it just right. And this is very important, I think, for us to be able to emphasize at the center. It's so easy to say of Dylan, as many have done, oh, he's simply a genius. He's operating on a different plane than the rest of us. I do think there's truth to that. It is mind-boggling what he achieves, and again has done for 60 plus years with song after song. But it doesn't mean that it's coming out of nowhere. This is an artist who is so dedicated to his craft, who wakes up every morning and does the work. And I really love that we're able to showcase that with this sort of material at the center, and that you can come and see with it. And there are endless examples that we have on display, because we feel so strongly about the importance, again, of emphasizing that creative process. I love when visitors come in and can see this kind of material.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, please interject.
No worries. I'm looking through some of the comments and some notes on just reluctance to open up those letters, et cetera, et
Uh,
cetera. But can you speak to, and you mentioned those rough, the mocked up versions. Can you speak to the value of having those rough drafts versus a finished product? The mocked up version where you have the notes in the margins, the value
yeah.
of having those, and what have you been able to learn, if you can give us an example about him by virtue of combing through a lot of his work, his sandbox work, his work where he's clearly, forming thoughts or updating his notes. How has that benefited you all
Yes.
in the work that you're doing at the center?
Thanks for asking, Michael. I think that absolutely gets to the heart of what we're most interested in and passionate about. And I'll name a couple of examples. There's a absolutely wonderful song. I put it in my Dylan top five, called "Joker Man," a song that he wrote in 1983, possibly started in 1982, but we released on a record he released in 1983 called "Infidels," a really wonderful record, produced by a guy named Mark Knopfler, who was the leader of the band Dire Straits, and those guys worked really well together. Joker Man is a beautiful song with a kind of reggae lilt to it that opens up the album Infidels. We could debate for hours on just who the Joker Man of the title is. He appears in different guises in that song. The song goes in so many different directions and sort of classic Dylan way of there's changes in tense and pronoun and a multitude of characters and stories being told. And what we found in the archives are 10 distinct iterations of the lyrics to Joker Man. And we have an interactive display in the galleries where you can, on a touch screen, click through each and every version of Joker Man and look from start to finish just how far Dylan takes it. In that case, it seems like this is a song that had him in its grip, if I can personify somehow the song itself as a living, breathing entity, because Dylan just kept going back again and again, and he wasn't satisfied. And he starts with, for example, there was a line in the song in the first two versions, where he writes, "It all boils down to race and class." Now, that's a pretty straightforward, dare I say, even somewhat prosaic phrase for Dylan to use. He's usually a little more poetic than that. And sure enough, after the second rewrite of Joker Man, he gets rid of that line altogether and instead starts the song, "Standing in the water, casting your bread." Uh, and of course, he's going off on a totally different tangent. We pick up a kind of biblical, storytelling, mythic structure. He's just developing these things and writing and rewriting and crossing out until he arrives at something that he feels is done. Now, even that is premature because Dylan will then go out and perform the song Joker Man in a radically different way. So if I urge you all, if you don't know the song, stream it or find it, or maybe you have it in your collection at home, listen to the recorded version, which is this wonderfully paced 6-minute song. What does Bob Dylan do? For the first time in ages, he books a TV appearance after the song and album are released. He goes on the David Letterman show, and he asks a punk band from Los Angeles called the Plugs, who had receive a phone call. "Hey, it's Bob Dylan. You want to come on the David Letterman show with me?" And they can't believe what's happening, and they say yes, and they play Joker Man, and it sounds nothing like the recorded version. He's continuing to change lyrics, and this goes on and on throughout Dylan's career up to present day, where he will keep the material and these songs fresh for himself, fresh for us as listeners and as longtime audience members, there's just always surprises. What the marginalia and the multiple versions of the song show us is that, again, that restless creativity, that need to reinvent, to not be satisfied with a first attempt, to just explore and go where I don't know if he thinks in terms of the muse, the artistic muse, but it's a convenient sort of way for me to talk about it. You know, wherever his artistic impulse takes him, and he bravely pursues those paths. He's gone down avenues that haven't always resonated with listeners. Dylan infamously, proclaimed himself a born again Christian in 1978. This was perhaps, since the going electric moment, one of the most shocking moments in his career for longtime fans. Here you have perhaps the ultimate iconoclast, aligning himself, you know, with a mainstream religion and set of spiritual beliefs. But that was something that was absolutely heartfelt for Dylan at that period in his life. And as we all do, we go through life and, you know, make our best way forward and rely on different philosophies and tenets. And for those years, Dylan really found his way through Christianity. He made what's known as the Born Again trilogy of records, which is filled with absolutely great gospel tinged music. Uh, I'm getting away from the notes on the margins, but I guess just to continue to on this theme of him pursuing his path, writing these songs, often not being satisfied. There's another great song called Dignity. And what do we find in the archive but a notebook, 40 pages of lyrics to the one song called Dignity. He cut it in the recording studio on a number of occasions and kept it never made the final cut when he was putting the albums together. It finally was released on a compilation of previously unreleased material. But here's this wonderful song, Dignity. There's another one called Series of Dreams that he wrote and rewrote and rewrote. And in the end, didn't even like how it turned out initially, not enough to put on the album for which it was written. And only years later does he decide to share these things. Uh, so
Yeah.
this is the kind of artist he is, and really it's in that spirit that we try to celebrate and analyze and investigate and explore his body of work.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. And
Sure.
I can have another question I can ask, or if you like, I can wait and bring it back to your attention, whatever you prefer.
Let me say one more thing before I forget, because
Good
it
deal.
gets. I think this is you know, I titled the talk you know, living artists and thinking about legacy. Uh, Here's again a way that Dylan is so unique. Now, the Dylan Center is practically alone in being a museum like setting that's devoted to a single artist who is still very much alive and kicking and with us. And we hope is for a long, long time. Um, and that's very intentional on Dylan's part. Uh, you have him, you know, again in 2016 deciding, okay, I should make the decision on what happens to this material. Not that he wanted to curate it. And again, he's been 100% hands off, but he did, you know, during his lifetime, make the decision to, in a way, cement his legacy further. I mean, it was in no danger of being, he's in no danger of being forgotten. But the fact that the collection now resides in a place where visitors from all over the world can come, I think was very savvy of him, and I think it's made the question um, of, you know, how does he think about what happens when he's no longer with us? How does the center play a part in continuing to tell that story? We want to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma forever telling these, and I think it was very smart of Dylan to tackle that question of legacy while he's still very much writing his own story and continuing to write and create. This is someone who also, in addition to releasing 40 plus studio albums, has had a whole alternative chronology of his discography through what he calls the bootleg series. And we're coming up on volume 18 of the bootleg series. So this has been an authorized uh, sort of parallel track of releases since the late 1980s, of Dylan unearthing his back catalog. Now, I want to say how unique this is because we've seen other artists who didn't necessarily grapple with these questions of legacy and longevity while they were still with us. I'd point, say, to terrible losses in music. Prince being one, Tom Petty being another. Now, it's not as if those two people didn't give us enough during their lifetime that we have, the rest of our lives and many, many more to enjoy and listen to. But unfortunately, with Prince and Petty not being around to make these decisions for themselves, that the catalogs and the estates have gotten tangled up in family disagreements and legal tangles that have prevented material from being released, or perhaps things have been released, but maybe not with the care that one might hope to see. So, as an archive, we're in such a unique position. The artist for whom we do all this work is still with us. In a way, he pointed the direction that we're taking by treating the material in the way we are, and I think he's done that much more to ensure his own legacy. I wanted just to be sure to make that point. But Michael, please hit me with other questions. Otherwise, you'll hear me natter around forever. I hope I'm holding folks on the audience chat.
Indeed, you are. In fact, there were several teachers, including Douglas, Nancy, and Audra, who said they were going to prepare a road trip. They're going to get a road trip together to come on out. They're convinced.
Please do.
They're convinced. But a question that we have from Stephen, he mentions, I understand Dylan's modesty, but was there ever a time in his life where he is known to have acknowledged the importance of his voice at that time in history? And Stephen admits that he knew very little about him before the release of the film. And so was there ever a time
Okay.
where he acknowledged the importance of that voice?
Well, I would say in the early years, as he's certainly not positioning himself as a leader of any sort, but he's feeling the need to participate in the civil rights movement. Here he is, young guy arriving in Greenwich Village, the hotbed of progressivism and radicalism in art, in life, in romance, and everything. And every day is yet another shocking, violent incident in the civil rights struggle. And he really felt a strong connection to everyone working on the front lines of that movement. His way of participating was writing songs. The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, songs about Emmett Till, even something like A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, or certainly at the Times They Are A-Changin', or the Mysteries of Blowin' in the Wind. All of these, masterpiece songs that he's coming up with, he feels is his contribution to social change. He was at the March on Washington, with MLK, with Peter, Paul, and Mary, with Joan Baez, with Len Chandler, all these incredible, political, social, and artistic figures. And so, again, while he would never want to claim voice of a generation. Again, he was very adamant that that was not what he was about. I think his presence and his comfortable interactions with people who he knew were doing the frontline work and literally putting their lives on the line was a kind of tacit acknowledgement of the power that those songs could have. Later, during the Born Again years, he was an unapologetic proselytizer and really felt that music could do the Lord's work, if you will. So I think it was that. Later on, I mean, here he is, the first and only to this date songwriter who's been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2016, coincidentally the same year that he made the decision to accession the archive to us in Tulsa. Now, he did not attend the Nobel Prize ceremony, much to the consternation of the organizers, who would have at least appreciated an in-person thank you all. But instead, he sends his dear friend and the equally legendary, gifted musician and writer and artist Patti Smith, and asked Patti Smith to go and accept on his behalf. Perhaps that would have been a moment for him to say in person, wow, I'm so pleased you recognized my life's work as a songwriter. But no, he didn't take that opportunity. Now he's accepted some invitations. He sang at the White House for the Obamas. He's never come out and aligned himself with a particular politician. But let's just say I can't imagine him showing up at the Kennedy Center anytime soon. But certainly he was honored to be acknowledged by President Obama. There's a beautiful rendition of "The Times They Are Changing" that he sang at that event. But he's let us as listeners, and he's let critics do their work to, I suppose, try to place him within the scheme of things, and he's just less apt to do it on his own. Oh,
Perfect. Thank you.
yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Any additional questions, we'll save them for the end. Again,
Okay.
I remind everyone, if you should have any questions, please feel free to enter into the chat. We have about 20 more minutes remaining, so we're going to move ahead. Thank you, Steve. We're fine.
Okay. Michael, can I mention the education component that we have at the center? Because I think that might
Oh,
be,
oh,
I just want to let all of you educators out there know that this is a very important part of our mission. Uh,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, so I'll just go through a few of our initiatives, and these are some of, for me, the most meaningful and exciting things that we're doing. Uh, we've since the center opened, I think we've had now about 10,000 students come in, largely from the Tulsa public school system, but from other areas, from some private schools as well. But we really try to place the emphasis on our public school system. And so students come in with their educators for field trips, sometimes as young as third and fourth grade. I think they're just happy to be out of the classroom. I don't know what they're making of this guy Dylan and his music, but they can run around. We have a chalk wall where all viewers and visitors are encouraged to, add notes and pictures and lyrics. And so the students inevitably find the wall and paint beautiful pictures on it. And then the older students come in and they're ready to engage. Maybe they've heard of Dylan as their grandfather's favorite artist, or their hip moms, or older sisters, or aunts uh, favorite artist, and they're ready to engage. And if I have time, I always join my colleagues who lead all these wonderful education programs, and I'll ask, students, what do you think of this guy? Do you know about him? Since the film came out, I get many more raised hands than I did before, and I'm thrilled that the film is serving as a gateway for younger viewers and audiences to want to learn more about the guy that heartthrob Chalamet plays. I think that's what might have drawn them to the film, but then they get really wrapped up in the power of music and the story. The older students, I think, are really connecting, and I always, as with all visitors, we encourage students to tap into their own creative potential. Uh, to that end, we have in classroom programs. One is called Tangled Up in Tunes, and that title's a play on Dylan's song Tangled Up in Blue. And for that, through some generous grants that we've received, I should say, we're a nonprofit. We exist thanks to the largesse of every one of our members and our donors and some of our corporate partners. We are not government funded, which right now I'm feeling very good about, that we're not reliant on funds that might suddenly be yanked away. So, Tangled Up in Tunes, we have educators and local musicians going into classrooms, mostly middle school, I'd say seventh through ninth grade, and we're doing instrument lessons. So, for a lot of the students, this is the first time that they've held a guitar. They're being taught chords. They're being taught, if they so wish, how to play harmonica. We do songwriting workshops. where we'll look at the Dylan manuscripts and, look at this. Here's how one songwriter goes about writing his lyrics. What if you were to write a song? How would you approach it? What would you do? And wonderful songs and performances have resulted when these students get together and just start bashing away on their instruments. It's really wonderful to hear. We're also very fortunate to have worked on a couple of occasions now with the absolute amazing legend Mavis Staples. Mavis and her band performed on our opening weekend in May of 2022. Mavis then came back for another absolute raise the roof performance. She is a force of nature and just a beacon of goodness and light. If you've ever been lucky enough to see Mavis perform live, she and Dylan go way, way back. As a quick gossipy aside, Dylan proposed to Mavis Staples. She politely turned him down, but they've remained, this is decades ago, but they've remained very, very good friends and mutual admirers. Mavis allowed us to name an essay contest in her name. So we have something called the Mavis Staples Freedom Highway Essay Award. We're currently in our second year, and we go out into all schools in Tulsa County, and we invite 11th and 12th graders to write essays. We give them prompts, and the prompts are always around, Mavis Staples mixed incredible music that makes you get up and move with social justice messages. Write about ways that you feel music that you listen to today can help change the world for the better, or are there songs or artists who have spoken to you and helped you make positive change in your life? And we get wonderful responses. I'm just starting to look at one of the reviewers for this second year of submissions at for our first year, and we'll do it again this year and in the future. The winner of the essay contest receives a $5,000 check that can go toward any form of education that the student chooses to pursue. The runner-up gets $1,000. We did a public ceremony for them at the Mavis Staples concert for the first year. So, we had a full crowd just cheering them on. And I tell you, as I'm sure so many of you on this call know, who are in the day-to-day trenches and doing the incredible work you do teaching, boy, it gave me hope for future generations to hear how beautifully articulate and passionate and thoughtful and wise and empathetic these students are, and it comes across in the essays. So I'm really proud that we're able to do that program, and I wanted to be sure to mention that one. And if there are more questions, I'm happy to take them.
A good deal. There was a question actually I was holding on to, and I figured since we're winding down, as I was walking through the center, I saw a piece on Chuck D, and you and me had a short conversation about that. I'm interested if you can say a little bit about that connection between, interestingly enough, hip hop and how I would say how later artists across multiple genres have received Dylan. You've spoken to it a little bit, but interestingly enough, his style, cadence, the rhythmic nature of his delivery, of his lyrics, things like that. But I was intrigued by that last year, and was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
That's a great question. So many artists, as you say, cite Dylan as a key influence. From everyone in the sort of singer-songwriter mold to, think of your favorite indie rock band, soul and R&B artists, and definitely folks also in punk. I'll mention quickly before I get to Chuck D, someone like Henry Rollins, who was in the band Black Flag, a hardcore punk band in Los Angeles in the early 80s, who's become, again, himself a kind of elder statesman. Now he does only spoken word performances. And when Henry came in, we had a long interview and conversation, and he said, look, I was a tough guy, and all the punk guys in LA, we were all trying to be harder than the next guy. but of course we all listened to Dylan, and we knew that that guy was the original punk. So it was great to hear Henry say that. Now Chuck D is someone obviously, just a revolutionary music maker in rap and hip hop with Public Enemy. Uh, just that the beyond brilliant approach to what they were doing sonically, so adventurous. The way those records are produced, and the way that they were in that great speaking truth to power sort of way with a song like Fight the Power. Chuck D completely recognizes in Dylan that same spirit of of shaking up the status quo. And Chuck D's music might sound totally different than Dylan's, and as it should, but he's someone who's very smart about music history, and of course he sees that lineage, and even down to not just lyrically, but you think of something like Dylan's "Subterranean Homesick Blues" uh, from 1964, which I've played it for students, and I said, "What do you think? Is this a rap song?" And first, they're like, "No way, that he wouldn't have known about rap." I said, "Well, it wasn't called that then, but listen to the way." And I think Michael, you were sort of referring to this. Listen to the cadence of his voice and that rhythm he's getting, and that kind of ta 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 staccato sort of delivery of these surreal stream of consciousness lyrics. It's not so much of a jump, and Dylan himself was already thinking of somebody like Chuck Berry, who was doing that rapid fire vocal delivery with a song like "Too Much Monkey Business." Jump to Elvis Costello and his song "Pump It Up," with that outpouring of rhythmic lyricism, and then you get to the great rap and hip hop guys. I don't know if all or any of them were consciously thinking about something like "Subterranean Homesick Blues," but there's a lineage there. I'm not claiming Dylan invented rap or or hip hop. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong,
understood.
but
Uh,
but but there's always a precursor to these modes of expression that then become
yeah,
you know com- complex
yeah.
world building genres onto themselves.
Well, thank you for responding to that and also pointing out your opportunities to um, play the music for the students,
Yeah,
because it becomes a gateway, it's familiar to them. And now all of a sudden it opens up a new world. So solid instructional approach. Thank you for sharing that.
of course.
Uh, okay. Um, we have about 9 minutes remaining.
Okay.
And so there was a question about of the artists who covered Dylan, which one, in your opinion, highlights or amplifies Dylan's work? I know that is
Oh,
a difficult question.
yeah. Well, let's see. I can name some favorites. And I mean, I might have a different answer tomorrow, just because I'm always listening to different things. And Dylan songs strike me differently as I get older. They're always just waiting patiently to be rediscovered. And that's true for the artists who cover him too. But I am a big fan of the English singer songwriter Robin Hitchcock, who is a wonderfully sort of quintessentially British surrealist. He's been making music for 40 plus years, and he's covered Dylan many times. And he has a version of a Dylan song called "Trying to Get to Heaven" that I think is very lovely. Um, Robin happens to be mentioned. Robin Hitchcock happens to be married to an Australian singer songwriter, Emma Swift. They both now live in Nashville. And Emma Swift released a record playing off of a Dylan album title I mentioned earlier, "Blood on the Tracks." Emma's record is called "Blonde on the Tracks." Uh, and her versions on that record of Dylan songs like "Visions of Joanna," uh, like "Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands," um, uh, "Going, Going, Gone," I think are just knockouts. I encourage everyone to find the Emma Swift record. It's just lovely. Another one I have to mention is Diana Krall. Perhaps I mean, really one of our preeminent jazz vocalists and pianists of the last 30 plus years. She's a huge Dylan fan herself. And she recently participated in a multi-artist concert that we put on in Tulsa. And her version of what might be my favorite of all Dylan songs, "Simple Twist of Fate," is next level. What she does with that. So I would name that as one of my favorites. Um, and on and on, and then songs that pay homage to Dylan in various ways. If any of you on the call today, if you know the contemporary band, The War on Drugs, they're a really terrific rock band. They're led by a very good singer-songwriter named Adam Grandiseel, and he has the title track to their most recent record is called "I Don't Live Here Anymore," and Adam in that song is reminiscing about better times or younger times, and he's saying, "Yeah, like when we went to see Bob Dylan, we danced to Desolation Row," which is the title of a Dylan song. And so often, at least in a lot of the musicians I listen to, there are these nods or these paying homage to Dylan that I always find very moving.
All right. Thank you so much for that. We only have a few minutes remaining. So those of you who have questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. But Steve, if you would like to give us your closing remarks at this time, we can
Sure.
wind down here shortly. I believe we have a few more slides, so feel free
Oh
to
gosh,
move
we do
ahead.
have a
Thank
few more
you.
slides. Look at that. Okay.
It's all good.
I mentioned Mavis Staples. Let me get to it. I mentioned the great Mavis Staples earlier, and it's always a treat to be able to show her. You know, she walked into the center, and again, I shared gossip that Dylan was so smitten with her and proposed in their younger days. And though she turned him down, you know, she's covered his music. They've toured together, and here's Mavis Staples, who I can't believe I'm getting to meet. And she walks in and just looks around and with that smile on her face says, "Oh, Bobby," you know, just like that. And I thought, well, if we have to close tomorrow, which of course we don't, but I thought we have made Mavis Staples happy, and that's enough right there. So that was quite a special moment. Here's the great Patti Smith, who performed at the for the Dylan Center. She's unbelievable. If you've ever seen her on stage, she commands the stage like very few other artists do. I'd mentioned Elvis Costello before. He's become a good friend of the center. Here's the wonderful Taj Mahal. He just performed a concert with us, a tribute to a long gone Tulsa musician, Oklahoma musician named Jesse Ed Davis. So the Taj, the great blues musician, participated in that. When we first opened the center, that's the tallest building in Tulsa, and we went all out. And as you can see, the folks there helped us spell out Bob. So it was really a big celebration when the center finally opened. So I'll leave you with that image, and I will encourage all of you whenever you can to come and make the visit. You know, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know ahead of time. The best part of my job is meeting folks from all over the world who come in. You never know on any given day who's going to walk in the front door, and it's just always such a pleasure to trade Dylan stories with fellow fans and certainly educators. You are our people, so we really would love to welcome you in. Um, uh, yeah, so that's a bit about what we do, and I hope if you're Dylan fans, you'll appreciate what we're doing. If you're a little less familiar with him, I hope that this serves as a gateway of sorts. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you.
And thank you all for joining us this evening. And virtual applause to Steve Jenkins for joining us tonight. Steve, I dropped in a few links that you shared with me.
Oh, great.
And I dropped them all in a single message just now, so they may be a bit jumbled. But just know that the Bob Dylan Center sizzle reel will be there, the Patti Smith portrait, as well as the making of Bob Dylan's Christmas in the Heart. I will drop those in separate messages to you all so that you can access those links as well, and also continue to follow all that's happening at the Bob Dylan Center. And shout out to those of you who will be making that road trip. I tell you, you will enjoy it. It is an incredible experience, and while you're there, you get the opportunity to step next door to the Woody Guthrie Center.
Oh,
So
100%. It's a big part of the
100%,
appeal. Yeah.
100%. And
We could do a whole other talk on Woody. I'm sure my counterpart, who's the director there, she would love to tell you all about Woody. Who, there'd be no Bob without Woody. So it's to him we owe everything in so many ways.
I tell you what, we have another season that's going to start. It's going to launch in September. So who knows? You never know. We may have that Guthrie webinar on our slate. So again, thank you so much, Steve, and I appreciate you, and I look forward to continuing our conversations when I return to Tulsa this summer for our Artificial Intelligence and Digital Literacy Institute. So again, for everyone who's here tonight, I will encourage you to continue to follow us, the National Humanities Center.org, for all the happenings, all the events, and the plans for the upcoming spring, summer, and fall. You can follow us on our various social media channels at National Humanities as well as NHC Education. And for those of you, the Humanities in Class Facebook page is still live. So I encourage you all to check that out when you have the opportunity. And of course, support the humanities education programs. We provide a bridge between the academic world and the working classroom. Your gift, no matter how modest, can open up a world of ideas for teachers and rekindle their enthusiasm for the subjects they teach by providing the knowledge and the tools that they and their students need to make a difference. And again, thank you for those of you who have already contributed to the center. We are, in fact, a private nonprofit institution, and we certainly appreciate any gift, no matter how small, large or small. Next webinar, March 25th, Playful Genres, Leveraging Games as Opportunities for Inquiry. We have Josh Call from Grandview University who will be here. And so we have a little bit of time between our next webinar. And so some of you all will be on spring break. And so if you are, or if you're on spring break now, I hope you are having a relaxing and restorative break. And in the spirit of Steve's recommendation for Joker Man, we're going to close out with Joker Man. And again, take care and be well. And we will talk to you very soon. Appreciate y'all.